"You smell poor," a billionaire insults a single dad at a glittering gala. But when she collapses from a deadly allergic reaction and he becomes the only one who can save her life, a buried secret about family shatters everything. Will pride and power tear them apart, or will love rewrite their fate? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The chandelier lights sparkled off crystal glasses and designer jewelry, casting dancing patterns across the marble floors of the grand ballroom. Ethan Cole's fingers tightened around the handle of his cleaning cart as he checked his watch for the third time that hour. 8:45 p.m. His shoulders slumped under his gray uniform jacket. Just 4 more hours, he whispered to himself, calculating the overtime pay in his head. Lily's asthma medication wasn't going to pay for itself. He thought of his 8-year-old daughter at home with Mrs. Peterson from next door, probably already in her pajamas, drawing pictures at the kitchen table. The image gave him strength as he maneuvered between clusters of wealthy partygoers, collecting discarded napkins and empty champagne flutes. The gala buzzed with conversation and tinkling laughter. Ladies in flowing designer gowns twirled on the dance floor, while men in crisp tuxedos discussed business deals over aged whiskey. No one spared Ethan a glance. He was just another shadow moving through their glittering world, and that was fine by him. The less attention, the better. "Did you hear?" A woman's voice caught his ear as he bent to pick up a fallen appetizer napkin. "Alexandra Harrington is actually attending tonight. I thought she never came to these smaller events anymore," her companion replied. "Well, the hospital wing is being named after her father. She had to show face." Ethan straightened up, trying to blend into the background as more guests crowded around the entrance. The energy in the room shifted, backs straightened, voices hushed, and heads turned toward the grand double doors. Alexandra Harrington made her entrance like a queen holding court. Her emerald green gown caught the light with every graceful step, and diamonds dripped from her ears and throat. A small group of equally well-dressed people flanked her, hanging on her every word and gesture. Ethan couldn't help but notice how her perfect posture and lifted chin screamed old money and privilege. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist, revealing sharp cheekbones and red lips curved in what seemed to be a permanent expression of mild disdain. He quickly looked away and focused on his task, gathering more empty glasses onto his cart. The last thing he needed was to draw attention to himself. He had a job to do, and getting caught staring at Alexandra Harrington wouldn't help him earn the money Lily needed. The night wore on. Ethan's feet ached in his worn work shoes as he made endless circuits of the ballroom. He'd already had to empty his cart twice, and the party showed no signs of winding down. The band played on, the champagne continued to flow, and the air grew thick with perfume and cigar smoke. "Excuse me," he murmured automatically as he squeezed past a group of laughing women. None of them acknowledged him. He checked his watch again. 10:15 p.m. His back was starting to protest from all the bending and lifting, but he couldn't afford to take a break. Every minute counted toward that overtime pay. The cleaning cart was nearly full again. Ethan carefully stacked another layer of empty glasses, making sure nothing would topple as he made his way toward the service entrance. He just needed to get through the crowd one more time. He was so focused on keeping the glasses balanced that he didn't notice Alexandra Harrington had stepped backward into his path until it was too late. The collision wasn't hard, but it was enough to make her stumble slightly in her designer heels. Time seemed to freeze. The nearby conversation stopped. Alexandra turned slowly, her perfect features twisting into a mask of disgust as she took in his gray uniform and weathered face. Her eyes, cold as winter frost, swept over him from head to toe. The corner of her mouth curled up in a cruel smirk. "You smell poor," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent space around them. Ethan's face burned as scattered laughter rippled through the watching crowd. His hands gripped the cart handle so tight his knuckles turned white, but he kept his eyes down, unable to meet the mocking stares of the wealthy guests surrounding him. The shame sat heavy in his chest as he stood there, exposed and humiliated. All he'd wanted was to earn enough money to help his daughter breathe easier. Now he was the evening's entertainment for people who spent more on a single glass of champagne than he made in a day. Alexandra's heels clicked against the marble floor as she turned away from Ethan, her satisfied smirk still playing on her perfectly painted lips. The small crowd around them tittered with nervous laughter, their judgment hanging heavy in the air. Her designer dress swished as she took 3 confident steps. Then it happened. Her hand flew to her throat, manicured nails scratching at her neck. The champagne glass she held shattered on the floor, crystal shards scattering across the marble like ice. Her eyes went wide with panic as she tried to draw breath, but her airway was quickly closing. "Miss Harrington!" One of her assistants rushed forward, hands fluttering uselessly around her as Alexandra's knees buckled. Her face was turning an alarming shade of red, spots of purple beginning to appear. The small gathering of wealthy patrons backed away, their earlier amusement transformed into helpless horror. Someone screamed for help, the sound echoing off the ballroom's high ceiling. Alexandra's security team spoke urgently into their earpieces, but no one seemed to know what to do. Ethan didn't hesitate. He'd recognized the signs immediately. He'd seen them too many times with Lily not to know. He pushed through the circle of onlookers, dropping to his knees beside Alexandra's trembling form. Her eyes locked onto his, filled with desperate fear. "Anaphylactic shock," he said firmly, already reaching into his jacket pocket where he always kept Lily's spare EpiPen. "Does anyone know what she's allergic to?" "Shellfish," a woman in a silver dress called out. "The canapes. They must have." Ethan didn't wait for her to finish. He'd already pulled out the EpiPen, removing the safety cap with practiced efficiency. Alexandra's breathing was becoming more labored, her lips taking on a bluish tinge. "This will help," he said, his voice steady and calm, the same tone he used when Lily had an asthma attack. "I need to inject it into your outer thigh. It'll hurt for a moment, but it will help you breathe." Alexandra managed a tiny nod, her fingers now clutching at his shirt sleeve. The expensive fabric of her dress rustled as Ethan pressed the EpiPen against her thigh and triggered the mechanism. She flinched at the sharp jab, but her grip on his arm didn't loosen. The next few minutes felt eternal. Ethan kept one hand on her shoulder, monitoring her breathing as the epinephrine began to work. Gradually, her gasping became less desperate, though her body still trembled. The color slowly returned to her face, the dangerous purple tinge fading. "Deep breaths," he encouraged softly. "Nice and slow. You're going to be okay." The sound of sirens grew louder outside the building. Alexandra's security team had cleared a path through the ballroom, and soon paramedics burst through the grand doors, their equipment clattering against the marble floor. They quickly surrounded Alexandra, their practiced movements efficient and precise. As they worked, Ethan began to step back, but Alexandra's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone who'd just been through such an ordeal. The paramedics worked around him, checking her vital signs and preparing her for transport. They carefully lifted her onto the stretcher, and still, she wouldn't let go of Ethan's wrist. Her perfectly styled hair was now disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her earlier aristocratic poise completely stripped away. In that moment, she looked almost human. As they began to wheel her toward the exit, Alexandra's eyes found his again. The haughty disdain from earlier was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, rough from her ordeal. "Why would you help me?" The question hung in the air between them as the paramedics continued their work. Her fingers finally released their grip on his wrist, leaving behind crescent-shaped marks from her nails. The stretcher moved through the doors, and Ethan watched as they loaded her into the ambulance, its red and white lights painting the night in alternating flashes of color. Around him, the gala guests buzzed with excitement, already turning the incident into the latest society gossip. But Ethan stood still, feeling the weight of Alexandra's question. The same woman who had humiliated him minutes before had looked at him with such confusion, such disbelief, that someone she deemed beneath her would choose to help her. He looked down at the empty EpiPen in his hand, thinking of Lily and her brave smile every time she had an asthma attack. Some things were more important than pride or social status. Some things were just about being human. The ballroom's elegant atmosphere had been shattered, leaving behind scattered glasses, abandoned plates, and the lingering echo of sirens in the night. The marble floor still sparkled under the chandelier's light, indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded upon its surface. And in the space where Alexandra had collapsed, a single crystal earring lay forgotten, catching the light like a tear. Ethan paced the sterile hospital corridor, his work boots squeaking against the polished floor. The harsh fluorescent lights made everything feel unreal, like a dream he couldn't shake. He'd followed the ambulance in his old pickup truck, driven by something stronger than obligation. Maybe it was the way Alexandra had looked at him from the stretcher, vulnerable and confused. The emergency room's waiting area was nearly empty at this late hour. His borrowed tuxedo jacket felt stiff and uncomfortable, a costume that didn't belong on his shoulders. He checked his phone, no messages from Mrs. Peterson, who was watching Lily. He'd have to call soon to explain why he wasn't home yet. "Are you the man who helped Aunt Alex?" The small voice made him turn. A little girl stood in the corridor, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a pink dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her brown hair was tied back in neat braids, and something about her face tugged at his memory. "Yes, I am," Ethan said gently, kneeling down to her level. "I'm Ethan. Are you Alexandra's niece?" The girl nodded, studying him with intelligent eyes. "I'm Emma." She took a step closer, head tilted to one side. "You have kind eyes. That's what Mommy always said in her diary." Ethan's breath caught. "Your mommy?" "Rachel Harrington. She died when I was really little." Emma's fingers played with the hem of her dress. "But I found her old diary in the attic last month. She wrote about you a lot." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Rachel. It had been 8 years since he'd last seen her, since she'd disappeared from his life without explanation. Their summer romance had been intense and beautiful, but her wealthy family had disapproved. One day, she was simply gone, leaving only a brief note saying goodbye. Emma moved closer, her small face serious. "There were pictures too. You look different now, but I knew it was you when I saw you helping Aunt Alex." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Something was shifting in the air between them, something monumental. Emma glanced around the empty corridor, then leaned in close to whisper, "Mommy says you're my daddy." The world stopped spinning for a moment. Ethan stared at the little girl, really looked at her, and saw what his heart had recognized from the first moment. She had Rachel's nose, her determined chin. But those eyes. Those were his eyes looking back at him. Memories crashed through him like waves. Rachel's laughter in the summer sunshine, their secret meetings in the park, plans whispered under starlight. She'd never told him. She'd been pregnant with his child, and she'd never told him. "Emma!" Alexandra's sharp voice cut through the moment. She stood in the doorway of her private room, still pale but upright, wearing a hospital gown that somehow managed to look elegant. Her throat was slightly swollen, but her eyes were clear and alert, and fixed on Ethan with a mixture of horror and resignation. "I told you to stay with Maria," Alexandra said to Emma, but there was a tremor in her usually confident voice. "Is it true?" Ethan's voice was hoarse. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady. "Alexandra, is what she's saying true?" Alexandra's perfectly manicured fingers gripped the doorframe. For a long moment, she said nothing, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Finally, she gave a single, stiff nod. "Rachel. She found out she was pregnant after Father sent her away," Alexandra said, each word seeming to cost her. "She wanted to tell you, but Father threatened to destroy your life if she did. He said a penniless handyman would never be worthy of a Harrington." Emma slipped her small hand into Ethan's. The simple gesture nearly broke him. He had a daughter, another daughter. All these years, while he'd been raising Lily alone, there had been another little girl out there, Rachel's daughter, his daughter. "I have a sister?" Emma asked hopefully, looking up at him. "Yes," Ethan managed to say, his throat tight. "Her name is Lily. She's just a little younger than you." Alexandra watched them, her usual icy composure cracking slightly. "This isn't how I wanted." She stopped, pressing her lips together. "Emma, go find Maria. Now please." But Emma held tighter to Ethan's hand. I don't want to go. I just found my daddy." The word daddy seemed to echo in the quiet corridor. Ethan felt tears burning behind his eyes, 8 years of lost moments crashing down on him at once. First steps, first words, first everything, gone forever. Alexandra leaned against the doorframe, looking more human than he'd ever seen her. "Rachel made me promise," she said quietly. "On her deathbed, she made me promise to tell Emma the truth when the time was right. She let out a shaky breath. "I never expected you to show up at my gala, much less save my life." The irony of it all wasn't lost on Ethan. Just hours ago, this woman had humiliated him, marked him as beneath her. Now she stood as the keeper of a secret that had changed his entire world. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. "Because I'm just like father," Alexandra admitted, and for the first time, there was shame in her voice. "I judged you by your bank account, not your character. Even after Rachel. I thought I was protecting Emma from a life of—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but her earlier words hung between them. "You smell poor." Emma tugged on Ethan's hand. "Can I meet my sister? Please?" Before Ethan could respond, a nurse appeared, with a clipboard, frowning at Alexandra. "Miss Harrington, you need to return to bed. Doctor's orders." Alexandra straightened, some of her usual authority returning. "We're not finished with this discussion," she said, but her voice lacked its usual bite. "Emma, come." But Emma's hand remained firmly in Ethan's, and in her stubborn expression he saw Rachel's determination. His chest ached with the weight of it all. Loss and discovery, pain and possibility, all wrapped up in this small hand holding his. Alexandra's gaze moved between them, and something in her expression shifted. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. The mighty Alexandra Harrington, humbled twice in one night, first by a severe allergic reaction, and now by the truth she'd kept buried for so long. The hospital room felt too small, too bright, as Alexandra shifted uncomfortably in her bed. Her designer gown had been replaced by a plain hospital gown, making her seem smaller, more human. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, the remnants of mascara smudged beneath them. Rachel was. Alexandra's voice cracked, and she cleared her throat. "She was afraid of our father's reaction. You know how controlling he was, Island." She wouldn't meet Ethan's gaze, instead fidgeting with the edge of her blanket. When she found out she was pregnant, she couldn't. Ethan gripped the plastic chair beside her bed, his knuckles white. The memory of Rachel, her gentle smile, her warm laugh, crashed over him like a wave. "She never told me," he whispered. "All those years." Emma sat quietly in the corner, her small legs swinging as she colored in a book a nurse had given her. She looked up occasionally, studying Ethan's face with curious eyes that mirrored his own. "Father sent her away," Alexandra continued, her voice flat. "Said it was for finishing school in Europe. She begged me not to tell you. Said it would be easier if you just thought she'd left you for her studies." She swallowed hard. "I watched her cry herself to sleep so many nights over video calls." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Ethan absorbed this information. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around it. 7 years. He'd missed 7 years of his daughter's life. Where? He had to stop, collect himself. Where did she go after Emma was born? Alexandra's face softened slightly, perhaps remembering her sister. She came back to the States, but stayed away from here. Started a new life in Seattle. She was doing well, teaching music. Her voice caught. The cancer was quick by the time they found it. Ethan stood abruptly, turning to face the window. Outside, the city lights blurred through unshed tears. He thought of Lily at home, with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, his daughter, his first daughter, who'd never known she had a sister. "Emma knows about you," Alexandra said quietly. "Rachel made sure of that. She kept a journal, wrote letters to Emma about her father, about how kind you were, how much she regretted." "Stop!" The word came out sharper than he intended. Ethan ran a hand over his face, feeling the rough calluses from years of manual labor catch against his stubble. Emma's crayon stilled on her paper. "Mommy said you fix things," she said suddenly, her voice small but clear. "She said you could fix anything that was broken." The simple statement hit him like a physical blow. He turned to look at his daughter taking in her dark curls, so like Rachel's, and the determined set of her chin that he recognized from his own reflection. Alexandra pushed herself up straighter in the bed, wincing slightly. Despite her disheveled appearance, her voice regained some of its earlier authority. "I need to thank you for what you did tonight. You saved my life." She paused, then added with careful precision, "But you need to understand something. This world, our world, it's not yours. Emma needs stability, consistency. She's already lost her mother." "She's my daughter," Ethan said quietly, but firmly. "She's also a Harrington," Alexandra countered. "There are expectations, responsibilities. Our father—" "Your father," Ethan interrupted, "kept me from knowing my own child for 7 years." A tense silence filled the room. Emma had stopped coloring completely now, watching the adults with wide eyes. "I know you probably hate us," Alexandra said finally. "You have every right to. But whatever you decide to do, remember that Emma's well-being comes first. She's been through enough trauma." Ethan looked at Emma again, his heart aching. She gave him a small, tentative smile that was so like Rachel's it hurt. "I would never do anything to hurt her," he said softly. "But I won't walk away from her either. Not now that I know." Alexandra's lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't belong in this world, Ethan. You proved that tonight at the gala. One act of heroism doesn't change who you are or who we are." The words stung, but Ethan stood his ground. "You're right. I'm not from your world. I'm just a janitor who works 2 jobs to make ends meet, but I'm also her father, and that matters more than any bank account or family name." He walked over to Emma, kneeling beside her chair. "I have to go now," he said gently. "But I'd like to see you again, if that's okay." Emma nodded, then surprised him by throwing her arms around his neck. She smelled of crayons and strawberry shampoo. Ethan hugged her back carefully, as if she might break. When he stood, Alexandra was watching them with an unreadable expression. "We'll have our lawyers contact you," she said, "to discuss arrangements." Ethan nodded once, then turned and walked out of the room. The hospital corridors seemed endless as he made his way to the exit, his mind spinning with everything he'd learned. When he finally pushed through the automatic doors, the night air hit his face like a splash of cold water. He stood there under the stars, his emotions warring inside him. Anger burned in his chest, anger at Rachel for keeping this secret, at Alexandra and her father for their part in it, at the unfairness of it all. But underneath that anger was something else, a sense of wonder, of possibility. He had another daughter. Somewhere in the midst of all this pain and deception was the miracle of Emma. The key clicked in the lock of apartment 3B, and Ethan stepped into the warm glow of home. His shoulders sagged with the weight of the evening's revelations, but the familiar scent of mac and cheese, Mrs. Martinez's specialty, lifted his spirits slightly. She was their elderly neighbor who watched Lily when he worked late. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out as she sprinted from the kitchen, her dark pigtails bouncing. She crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around him tight. "You're finally home!" Ethan scooped her up, holding her close. Her familiar weight against his chest anchored him in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. "Hey, sweetheart, were you good for Mrs. Martinez? She let me help make dinner." Lily pulled back, her brown eyes sparkling. "And I didn't even need my inhaler once today." Mrs. Martinez appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her kind eyes took in Ethan's exhausted expression. "Everything okay, Mijito? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a long night," Ethan managed to smile. "Thank you for watching her." After Mrs. Martinez left, Ethan and Lily sat at their small kitchen table. The overhead light flickered slightly, another thing he needed to fix. Steam rose from their bowls of mac and cheese, and Lily chatted about her day at school, her art project, and how Tommy Jenkins had eaten paste again. Ethan listened, trying to find the right words. How do you tell your 8-year-old that she has a sister she never knew about? That her father had loved someone who kept such a huge secret from him? "Lily Bug," he said finally, setting down his fork. "Something happened at work tonight. Something important." Lily stopped mid-story about recess, sensing the change in his tone. "Did somebody get hurt?" "No, well, yes, but she's okay now." Ethan took a deep breath. "Do you remember when we talked about your mom being in heaven, and how sometimes families can look different?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Like how Katie has two moms, and Marcus lives with his grandma." "Exactly." Ethan reached across the table, taking her small hand in his. "Well, tonight I found out something about our family. A long time ago, before you were born, I loved someone named Rachel. She was—" he paused, choosing his words carefully. "She was very special to me, but we lost touch, and she went away. What I didn't know was that she had a little girl. My little girl." Lily's eyes grew wide, her mac and cheese forgotten. "You mean, you have a sister, Lily. Her name is Emma, and she's 7 years old." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft hum of their ancient refrigerator. Lily's face scrunched up in thought, processing this earth-shattering news. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest, waiting for her reaction. "Does this mean I'll have a sister?" Lily whispered, hope blooming in her voice like the first flower of spring. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. "Would you like that?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, her whole face lighting up. "I always wanted a sister. Will she live with us? Can we share my room? Does she like to draw too?" Her excitement brought tears to Ethan's eyes. "Slow down, sweetheart. There's a lot we need to figure out first. Emma lives with her aunt right now, the lady who got sick tonight. We'll have to see what happens next. Is her aunt nice?" Ethan thought of Alexandra's cruel words at the gala, but he couldn't burden Lily with that. "She's different from us. But what matters is that Emma is family, just like you." They finished dinner, with Lily pepper-spraying him with questions about her new sister. During bath time, she wondered if Emma liked bubbles. While brushing teeth, she asked if Emma had lost any yet. Each innocent question twisted the knife of lost time deeper into Ethan's heart. Finally, it was bedtime. Lily's room was small but cozy, with walls covered in her artwork. Ethan tucked her in, smoothing her favorite purple blanket. "Daddy?" Lily murmured sleepily. "Can we pray for Emma tonight?" Ethan knelt beside her bed, clasping her small hands in his. "Dear God," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "thank you for this day. Thank you for keeping Lily healthy and safe. Please watch over Emma wherever she is tonight. Help us to be the family you want us to be. Amen." "Amen," Lily echoed, then drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face. Ethan kissed her forehead and quietly left the room. In his own bedroom, he opened his dresser drawer and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a photograph he hadn't looked at in years. Rachel's smile beamed up at him from the faded picture, her long dark hair dancing in the wind. They'd been so young, so in love, standing by the lake where they used to meet. He could almost smell the honeysuckle that grew wild there, hear her laugh echoing across the water. Sitting on the edge of his bed, Ethan traced Rachel's face with his finger. "What do I do now?" he whispered to the silence. The photograph offered no answers, only the ghost of a love lost and the weight of years that could never be recovered. The sound of Lily's gentle breathing drifted through the thin walls, mixing with the distant city sounds outside their window. In the quiet of the night, Ethan held the photograph and let himself remember the girl who had stolen his heart, and the daughter she had kept secret for so long. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Ethan's modest kitchen as he sipped his coffee, still trying to process the events of the previous night. His phone buzzed, displaying an unfamiliar number. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. "Mr. Cole." Alexandra Harrington's crisp voice cut through the morning quiet. "I expect you at the Riverside Tower penthouse in 2 hours. Emma should meet her father properly." The slight pause betrayed her discomfort. Ethan's throat tightened. "I'll be there. Don't be late." The line went dead. After dropping Lily at school with an extra tight hug, Ethan stood before the gleaming glass tower that pierced the city skyline. His weathered work boots seemed out of place on the polished marble floor of the lobby. The doorman eyed his worn jeans and simple button-down shirt with barely concealed disdain. "I'm here to see Miss Harrington," Ethan said, straightening his shoulders. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. Ethan's reflection in the mirrored walls showed a man both nervous and determined. His calloused hands, evidence of honest work, clenched and unclenched at his sides. The elevator opened directly into Alexandra's penthouse. Ethan's breath caught at the sweeping views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was decorated in cool grays and whites, more like an art gallery than a home. Everything screamed wealth and careful curation. "Daddy!" The excited squeal cut through the sterile atmosphere. Emma burst from around a corner, her dark curls bouncing, her face lit with pure joy. She wore a pale pink dress that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, but her smile was what captured his attention, so much like Rachel's. Emma threw herself at him without hesitation. Ethan caught her instinctively, his heart expanding with an immediate, overwhelming love. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "I knew you'd come," Emma declared, pulling back to study his face. Her small hands patted his cheeks. "You look just like in Mommy's picture." Alexandra appeared in a doorway, immaculate in a tailored pantsuit. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her fingers twisted the expensive watch on her wrist. "Emma, remember what we discussed about personal space." "It's okay," Ethan said softly, still holding his newly discovered daughter. "I don't mind," Emma beamed up at him. "Aunt Alex says you fix things. Can you fix my dollhouse? The door keeps falling off." "Emma," Alexandra's voice held a warning note. "Mr. Cole isn't here to—" "I'd love to," Ethan interrupted gently. He set Emma down but kept hold of her small hand. It felt right, natural. Emma bounced on her toes. "It's in my playroom. Come see." She tugged him through the penthouse, chattering about her toys, her school, her favorite colors. Each word was precious to Ethan, filling in 7 years of missing memories. The playroom was bigger than his entire apartment, filled with every toy a child could dream of. Alexandra followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. She watched with narrowed eyes as Emma showed Ethan the elaborate dollhouse, a perfect miniature Victorian mansion. Ethan knelt beside it, examining the tiny hinges. "Ah, I see the problem. Just needs a little adjustment." He pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket, he always carried one, and carefully tightened the microscopic screws. "You fixed it!" Emma clapped as the door swung smoothly. "You really do fix everything." "Some things are easier to fix than others," Ethan said, glancing at Alexandra. Her face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Emma settled cross-legged on the floor, arranging tiny furniture. "Will you stay and play, please?" Before Ethan could answer, Alexandra stepped forward. "Emma, darling, Mr. Cole and I need to discuss some things. Why don't you show Maria your fixed dollhouse?" She gestured to the uniformed nanny hovering in the doorway. Emma's face fell slightly, but she nodded. She gave Ethan another quick hug. "You'll come back, right?" "Of course," Ethan promised, his voice rough with emotion. Alexandra led him to a stark white living room. The furniture looked expensive but uncomfortable. She perched on the edge of a leather armchair while Ethan sat on the sofa, feeling like he might soil it just by existing. "She seems to have formed an immediate attachment," Alexandra said, her tone clipped, "which complicates things." "She's my daughter," Ethan said simply. "Nothing complicated about that." Alexandra's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the chair's arm. "Everything about this situation is complicated. Emma has been raised with certain expectations, standards. Your presence will require careful management." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "She's not a business merger, Alexandra. She's a little girl who deserves to know her father. A father who fixes things for minimum wage?" The words had less bite than her previous insults, but they still stung. "A father who loves her already," Ethan countered quietly. "Money isn't everything." Alexandra stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "If you're to be in Emma's life, it will be on my terms." She turned back, fixing him with a steel-edged glare. "I won't have her world disrupted more than necessary." Ethan met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. His voice remained calm but firm. "I understand you want to protect her, but I'm her father, and I have rights, too." They stared at each other, two worlds colliding, neither willing to back down. The morning sun caught Alexandra's perfect blonde hair like a crown, while it highlighted the threadbare patches on Ethan's shirt. But in that moment, their determination matched perfectly. Alexandra finally broke the silence, her voice carrying the weight of unmade decisions. "If you're to be in Emma's life, it will be on my terms." The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across Alexandra's penthouse living room as Ethan helped Lily out of his rusty Toyota Corolla. The car's door squeaked loudly, making him wince as he caught Alexandra's disapproving glance from her floor-to-ceiling windows above. "Daddy, will Emma like my crayons?" Lily clutched her worn backpack, filled with her favorite art supplies. Her brown pigtails bounced as she hopped from foot to foot, excitement making her forget her usual shyness. "I'm sure she will, sweetheart." Ethan smoothed down his cleanest work shirt, aware of its fraying collar. He'd tried his best to look presentable, but there was only so much he could do with his limited wardrobe. The doorman gave them a curious look as they entered the gleaming lobby. Marble floors reflected their images like mirrors, making Ethan feel even more out of place. But he straightened his shoulders, remembering he was here for Emma. When they reached Alexandra's door, Emma burst out before they could knock, as if she'd been watching through the peephole. "You're here!" She threw her arms around Ethan's waist, then turned to Lily with wide, hopeful eyes. "Is this my sister?" Lily peeked out from behind Ethan's leg, offering a shy smile. "I brought crayons," she whispered. Alexandra appeared in the doorway, elegant even in casual designer wear. "Emma, what have I said about opening the door without checking with me first?" Her tone was sharp, but Ethan noticed the slight softening in her eyes as she watched the girls. "Sorry, Aunt Alex." Emma grabbed Lily's hand. "Come see my room. I have a dollhouse that's taller than me." The girls disappeared down the hallway, their giggles echoing off the walls. Alexandra's lips tightened as she noticed the scuff marks Ethan's work boots left on her pristine floor. "You could have at least changed shoes," she said, crossing her arms. "And that car of yours. I could hear it backfiring from up here. It's hardly safe for children." Ethan took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. "That car has never let us down. I maintain it myself." "That's exactly what I mean." Alexandra gestured to the living room's white leather furniture. "Emma comes from a certain background. There are expectations, standards." They sat down, Ethan perching carefully on the edge of a sofa that probably cost more than his yearly salary. From down the hall came the sound of delighted squealing as the girls played. "Listen to that," Ethan said softly. "That's what matters, not the car I drive or the clothes I wear." Alexandra's perfect posture faltered slightly. "You don't understand. In our world, your world," Ethan corrected gently. "Emma needs love, stability, and values. Those don't come with a price tag." From Emma's room they heard Lily's voice. "Look, I'll show you how to draw a rainbow unicorn." Followed by Emma's enthusiastic, "Yes, please." Alexandra's fingers twisted in her lap. "I just want what's best for her." "So do I." Ethan leaned forward, his voice earnest. "But the best things in life aren't things at all. They're moments like this, sisters bonding, sharing, learning from each other." As if to prove his point, Emma and Lily came racing out, holding up their artwork. Emma had drawn what appeared to be 4 figures holding hands, herself, Lily, Ethan, and Alexandra. "Look what we made!" Emma thrust the drawing at Alexandra. "It's our family." Alexandra took the paper, her manicured fingers trembling slightly. She stared at the crayon figures, especially the smile Emma had drawn on her face, so much bigger and warmer than her usual careful expression. "The rainbow's a bit crooked," she murmured, but her voice lacked its usual criticism. "That's what makes it special," Ethan said. "Perfect isn't always better." Alexandra's eyes grew distant and her shoulders tensed. For a moment, she seemed to be looking at something far away, perhaps into her own past. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Harringtons don't make mistakes. Harringtons don't show weakness. Harringtons are perfect." She remembered countless dinners at formal tables, never allowed to speak unless spoken to. Birthday parties that felt more like business functions. The way her father had frowned at every small imperfection, every childish mistake. The girls' laughter pulled her back to the present. They had spread their crayons across her expensive carpet, creating more artwork with complete disregard for the mess they were making. Lily was teaching Emma how to blend colors to make a sunset, while Emma showed Lily how to draw stars. "Careful of the carpet," Alexandra said automatically, but her heart wasn't in it. She watched as Ethan got down on his knees beside them, admiring their work with genuine interest, asking questions about their creative choices, making them giggle with silly suggestions for what to draw next. "Mr. Cole," she started, then corrected herself. "Ethan, I know you think I'm being difficult about all this, but I think you're trying to protect Emma the only way you know how," he replied, looking up at her with those steady eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. "But sometimes the best protection is letting someone be exactly who they are." Alexandra's throat tightened as she watched Emma lean against Ethan's shoulder, completely at ease, while Lily showed them both how to make a paper airplane with one of their drawings. The scene before her was messy, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful in its simple joy. For a brief moment, she remembered being Emma's age, trying to show her father a drawing she'd made. He'd barely glanced at it before telling her to go practice her piano instead. "Art is for people who can't succeed at real things," he'd said. She'd never drawn another picture after that. Alexandra's silver Mercedes glided to a stop outside the Hawthorne Club, its polished marble columns gleaming in the midday Sunday. She glanced at Ethan in the passenger seat, noting his borrowed suit that didn't quite fit his broad shoulders. "Remember," she said, smoothing her designer dress, "these people are important donors for the Children's Hospital. Try not to." She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound cruel. "Embarrass you?" Ethan finished quietly, adjusting his slightly crooked tie. Alexandra pressed her lips together but said nothing. As they walked up the grand steps, Ethan maintained his dignity despite the obvious discomfort of his formal wear. The doorman's raised eyebrow at his appearance didn't escape either of them. The private dining room buzzed with the refined chatter of Boston's elite. Crystal glasses clinked, silver sparkled, and the scent of expensive perfume hung in the air. Heads turned as Alexandra led Ethan to their assigned table. "Alexandra, darling." A woman in her 50s air kissed Alexandra's cheeks. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she gave Ethan a questioning look. "And who might this be?" "Margaret, this is Ethan Cole. He's—" Alexandra hesitated for a fraction of a second. "He's Emma's father." The whispers started immediately. Ethan could feel curious eyes examining him from every direction. He focused on remembering which fork to use, just as he'd practiced the night before with Lily, using YouTube videos as their guide. "So, Mr. Cole," a man in an impeccable suit called from across the table, "what line of work are you in?" The conversation around them quieted, waiting for his response. Alexandra tensed beside him. "I'm a maintenance supervisor," Ethan replied evenly, meeting the man's gaze. "I keep things running smoothly at several buildings downtown." More whispers. A younger woman poorly concealed her smirk behind her napkin. "A janitor?" someone muttered, loud enough to be heard. Ethan took a slow sip of water. "Yes, among other things. I believe honest work has its own dignity." An elderly woman at the end of the table, Mrs. Eleanor Bradford, looked up from her soup. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, studied Ethan with interest. "Tell me, young man." Mrs. Bradford's voice carried authority earned through decades of philanthropy. "What made you choose that particular field?" Alexandra watched nervously as Ethan set down his water glass. His calm demeanor never wavered. "When my daughter Lily was born," he explained, "I needed flexible hours to care for her. Building maintenance let me be there for her doctor's appointments and school events. Sometimes, the most important job a person can have is being a good parent." Mrs. Bradford's face softened. "Indeed. My late husband started as a night watchman, you know, built himself up from nothing." She turned to Alexandra. "This young man understands what matters in life." Alexandra felt her cheeks warm, caught between her usual world of social expectations and the genuine appreciation in Mrs. Bradford's voice. The conversation shifted to the Children's Hospital fundraiser, but throughout lunch, Ethan handled each interaction with quiet grace. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions about the hospital's needs, and even made Mrs. Bradford laugh with a gentle joke about his first attempt at fixing a broken elevator. When the coffee was served, Mrs. Bradford beckoned Ethan to sit beside her. They spoke in low voices about Lily's asthma and Emma's love of drawing. Alexandra watched from across the table, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest as she observed Ethan's natural kindness with the elderly philanthropist. "Rather surprising," Margaret whispered to Alexandra. "He's quite decent, isn't he?" Alexandra found herself nodding before she caught herself. She quickly changed the subject to the upcoming charity auction, but her eyes kept drifting to Ethan and Mrs. Bradford. The drive home was quiet. Ethan looked out the window, his borrowed tie now loose around his neck. Alexandra gripped the steering wheel, trying to sort through her conflicting emotions. When they arrived at her penthouse, Emma burst out of the nanny's care and ran to them. "Daddy! Aunt Alexandra!" She threw herself into Ethan's arms, and he caught her with practiced ease, his face lighting up. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his formal demeanor melting away as Emma showed him her latest drawing. "Look, I drew our family. See, there's you and me and Lily and Aunt Alexandra." Emma's crayon creation showed stick figures holding hands, all with enormous smiles. Alexandra stood back, watching as Ethan knelt down to examine the artwork with exaggerated seriousness, making Emma giggle with his detailed questions about why she'd given him such spiky hair. Later, as Ethan prepared to leave for his evening shift, Emma tugged at Alexandra's sleeve. Her small face was earnest as she looked up at her aunt. "Daddy's fun," Emma declared. "He makes us laugh." Alexandra moved to the window, watching as Ethan's old Toyota disappeared down the street. The setting sun cast long shadows across the city, and she stood there long after he'd gone, her reflection in the glass wearing an expression she didn't quite recognize. She thought about Mrs. Bradford's words, about Ethan's quiet dignity throughout lunch, about Emma's laughter. Her manicured fingers touched the cool glass, and for once, she allowed herself to feel the confusion swirling inside her. The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees, scattering red and gold leaves across the cemetery grounds. Ethan stood between his daughters, holding their small hands as they approached Rachel's gravestone. The polished marble gleamed in the morning light, her name etched in elegant letters. Rachel Harrington, beloved sister and mother. Emma clutched a bouquet of yellow daisies, Rachel's favorite flowers, though the 7-year-old was only now learning this detail about her mother. Lily squeezed her father's hand tighter, sensing the weight of the moment. "Your mom," Ethan began softly, his voice catching slightly, "used to sing at the local coffee shop every Thursday night. She had the most beautiful voice I'd ever heard." Emma looked up at him with wide eyes, drinking in every detail. "What did she sing?" "She loved old folk songs," Ethan smiled, remembering. "But her favorite was, 'You Are My Sunshine.' She'd sing it to herself while working at the bookstore where we met." From behind a large oak tree several yards away, Alexandra watched the scene unfold. She'd followed them, telling herself it was to supervise Emma's well-being, but something else drew her there. A need to understand this man who had loved her sister. "One time," Ethan continued, kneeling between the girls, "your mom saw a stray kitten in the rain." Without hesitating, she scooped it up under her jacket and walked 2 miles in the storm to get it to a shelter. He chuckled softly. "She was soaked through, but she didn't care." That was Rachel, always putting others first. Emma placed the daisies at the base of the headstone, her small fingers tracing her mother's name. "Did she like to draw like me?" "She did," Ethan nodded. She filled notebooks with sketches, flowers, birds, people she saw on the street, anything that caught her eye. He pulled out an old folded piece of paper from his wallet. "This is one she drew of me, years ago." Alexandra inched closer, staying hidden but straining to see. The simple sketch captured Ethan's essence, his kind eyes, the slight curl of his smile. Rachel had always seen the good in people, even when Alexandra couldn't. "Sometimes," Lily spoke up, "when I'm drawing, I pretend Mom Rachel is teaching me too." She looked at Emma. Is that okay?" Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We can share her." Ethan wrapped his arms around both girls as they leaned into him. "Your mom had enough love for everyone. She taught me that love isn't something that runs out when you share it. It only grows bigger." Alexandra pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back unexpected emotions. She'd spent years building walls around her heart, telling herself that strength meant never showing weakness. But watching Ethan's gentle way with the girls, his obvious love for Rachel even after all this time, made those walls feel suddenly fragile. "I wish," Emma sniffled, "I could remember her hugging me." "Come here, sweetheart." Ethan gathered Emma closer. "Your mom hugged you every single day before you were born. She would talk to you, sing to you. And even though she's not here now, her love is still wrapped around you, just like these hugs we share." Lily wrapped her arms around her sister too. Group hug for Mom, Rachel. Alexandra watched as the three held each other, their love creating a circle that seemed to glow in the morning light. She remembered Rachel's last words to her. "Promise me you'll protect Emma, but don't let your fear of being hurt keep you from loving her." Ethan wiped Emma's tears with his thumb, then reached into his backpack. "I brought something special today." He pulled out a worn journal with a blue leather cover. "Your mom kept this diary when she was just a little older than you girls. I found it when cleaning out some old boxes. I thought maybe we could read a few pages together?" Emma's eyes lit up through her tears. "Yes, please." They sat on a nearby bench, the girls on either side of Ethan. His voice was gentle as he read Rachel's teenage thoughts about wanting to make the world kinder, about seeing beauty in simple moments, about believing in love even when others were cynical. Alexandra slipped away, unable to watch anymore. Back in her penthouse that evening, she pulled out her own copy of Rachel's diary, the one her sister had given her for safekeeping years ago. The pages were worn from repeated reading, tear-stained in places. She flipped to an entry from 10 years ago. "Alex tries so hard to be strong, to never let anyone see her cry. But I wish she knew that real strength isn't about building walls. It's about having the courage to let people in. Like Ethan. He taught me that love doesn't make you weak. It gives you something worth being strong for." Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. Alexandra touched her sister's handwriting, remembering Rachel's warm hugs, her gentle teasing, her unwavering belief that everyone deserved second chances. "I promised to protect her child," Alexandra whispered into the quiet room, her voice breaking. "But maybe I was wrong about Ethan." The old community hall stood at the edge of Pine Grove, its weathered brick walls holding decades of small-town memories. Ethan parked his truck in the gravel lot, watching as Alexandra's sleek black Mercedes pulled up beside him. Her expression through the window was a mix of doubt and curiosity. "Are you sure about this?" Alexandra asked as she stepped out, her designer heels crunching on the gravel. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but at least she'd tried to dress down for the occasion. Emma bounced out of the car, already dancing to the music that drifted through the hall's open windows. "Come on, Aunt Alex! I can hear the music!" Lily joined her newfound sister, both girls twirling in the early evening light. "They have the best cookies here," Lily added. "And sometimes Mr. Johnson brings his pet rabbit." Ethan smiled, noting how Alexandra's lips twitched at the girls' enthusiasm. "It's just families having fun together. Nothing fancy. That's what makes it special." Inside, paper streamers in rainbow colors crisscrossed the ceiling. Card tables lined the walls, loaded with homemade treats and punch bowls. Children darted between the legs of dancing adults, while elderly couples swayed to familiar tunes. Alexandra stood rigid just inside the doorway, her arms crossed. "It's quaint," she managed, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty rather than judgment. "Mrs. Peters," Lily called out, waving to a gray-haired woman manning the dessert table. "These are my new sister and aunt." The old woman's warm smile seemed to crack Alexandra's shell slightly. "Welcome, dears. Help yourselves to some apple pie. It's still warm." Emma tugged at Alexandra's hand. "Can we have pie, Aunt Alex? Please?" "I suppose." Alexandra let herself be pulled toward the dessert table, her perfect posture gradually softening. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. The girls dragged Alexandra from one spot to another, introducing her to what seemed like half the town. Ethan watched as her rehearsed social smile slowly transformed into something more genuine, especially when Emma proudly introduced her as "my Aunt Alex, who runs big companies but can't bake cookies." The music shifted to an upbeat country song, and the floor filled with dancers. Emma grabbed Alexandra's hands. "Dance with me!" "Oh, I don't," Alexandra started, but Emma's pleading eyes won out. Soon she was attempting to follow her niece's enthusiastic, if uncoordinated moves. A laugh escaped Alexandra's lips, genuine, unguarded, nothing like her usual controlled chuckle. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, began to loosen from its elegant twist. "These heels are impossible," she muttered after nearly tripping. Without hesitation she kicked them off, leaving them under a nearby chair. Standing barefoot on the worn wooden floor, she looked somehow younger, more real. The music slowed to a gentle waltz. Most of the children cleared the floor, making way for couples. Emma and Lily ran off to get more cookies, leaving Alexandra standing alone, suddenly vulnerable without the shield of the girl's energy. Ethan approached her carefully, noting how the sunset through the windows painted her face in soft gold. He extended his hand, a simple gesture that seemed to bridge their two worlds. "May I?" Alexandra stared at his offered hand, her eyes glistening with unexpected tears. For a moment, he thought she might refuse. Then her fingers slid into his, warm and trembling slightly. They moved together to the music, her bare feet silent on the floor beside his worn work boots. She was shorter without her heels, fitting perfectly against his shoulder. The distance between billionaire heiress and janitor dissolved with each step. "I used to love dancing," Alexandra whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Before everything, before Dad's empire, before Rachel," she trailed off, blinking rapidly. "Before the walls went up?" Ethan suggested gently. She nodded against his shoulder. Tears fell freely now, but she didn't seem to care who saw them. "I haven't felt this free in years," she confessed, her words barely audible above the music. No shareholders to impress, no image to maintain. Just this. They continued to dance as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows through the windows. Around them, other couples swayed. The hardware store owner and his wife of 50 years, young parents stealing a moment while grandparents watched their children, teenagers experiencing their first slow dance. Emma and Lily returned, watching their father and aunt with matching grins. Alexandra opened her arm, and the girls joined their dance, creating an awkward but joyful four-person sway that drew smiles from everyone nearby. In that moment, as the music played and Alexandra's bare feet moved across the floor, the last remnants of her carefully constructed facade crumbled away. Her laugh joined the girls' giggles, real and unreserved, echoing through the community hall like a song of liberation. The spring sun warmed the grass at Thompson Park as Alexandra sat on a pristine blanket she'd brought from home. She smoothed her linen pants, still not quite used to such casual attire. A gentle breeze carried the sound of children's laughter across the open field where Ethan kicked a soccer ball with Emma and Lily. "Goal!" Emma's voice rang out as she managed to get the ball past her father. Ethan fell dramatically to his knees, clutching his heart in mock defeat, while both girls giggled. Alexandra found herself smiling despite her usual reserve. "Did you see that, Aunt Alex?" Emma called out, waving with boundless energy. "I scored." Alexandra raised her hand in acknowledgement, struck by how different Emma seemed from the quiet child who'd lived in her penthouse just weeks ago. Here, playing in worn clothes and grass-stained sneakers, her niece radiated pure joy. Lily, not to be outdone, stole the ball and dashed across their makeshift field. Her previous shyness around Alexandra had melted away, replaced by comfortable familiarity. "Watch this," she called out, attempting a trick move Ethan had taught her. Alexandra observed how Ethan's eyes never left either child, his attention divided perfectly between them. He anticipated when Lily's asthma might act up, calling water breaks before they were needed. He knew exactly when Emma was about to get frustrated and would change the game slightly to keep her engaged. The sound of their laughter echoed across the park, drawing looks from other families. But these weren't the judgmental stares Alexandra was used to in her social circles. These were warm glances, appreciative of the simple scene before them. When the girls flopped onto the blanket for lunch, their faces flushed with exercise and happiness, Alexandra noticed how Ethan had packed their sandwiches with little notes tucked inside. Simple drawings and encouraging words that made both girls beam. "Daddy always writes us notes," Lily explained, showing Alexandra her paper with a carefully drawn heart. "Even when we're together." "Every day?" Alexandra asked, surprised by such a small but meaningful gesture. "Every single day," Emma confirmed, carefully folding her own note to save it. Alexandra watched Ethan distribute apple slices and carrot sticks, making sure each girl had equal portions. His movements were practiced, efficient, born from years of caring for Lily alone. Yet there was nothing mechanical about it. Every action was infused with attention and love. The familiar weight of her checkbook pressed against her hip from her designer handbag. She'd brought it intentionally, having planned this moment carefully. While the girls were distracted with their lunch, she gestured for Ethan to join her a few steps away. "I've been thinking," Alexandra began, her manicured fingers reaching for the checkbook. "About the girls. About their future." Ethan's expression shifted slightly, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "You're doing an amazing job with them, but there's so much they could have. Better schools, opportunities, security." She withdrew the checkbook, her pen poised. "Let me help. Name an amount. Within reason, of course." The sounds of the park seemed to fade as Ethan looked at the checkbook, then back at Alexandra. His face held no anger, no offense, just quiet certainty. "I don't want your money, Alexandra," he said softly, ensuring the girls couldn't hear. "I want family." "But surely—" "Look at them," he interrupted gently, nodding toward their daughters. Emma was showing Lily how to make a daisy chain, their heads bent together in concentration. "They have everything they need right here. Love, security, each other." Alexandra's hand, holding the checkbook, lowered slowly as she really looked at the scene before her. The girls' laughter, pure and unrehearsed. The way they leaned against each other like sisters who'd known each other forever, not just weeks. The simple contents of their lunch spread out on the blanket, nothing fancy but shared with so much joy. She thought of her own childhood lunches, eaten at an immaculate table with sterling silver utensils. A servant standing quietly in the corner. All the money in the world, and yet she couldn't remember a single note from her father, a single shared laugh over sandwiches. "But I want to contribute," she insisted, though her voice had lost its earlier conviction. "To help." "You already are," Ethan replied. "Every time you spend time with them, every time you show up. That's worth more than any check you could write." Alexandra slipped the checkbook back into her bag, feeling strangely relieved and unsettled at the same time. She watched as Ethan returned to the girls, accepting the slightly crooked daisy chain Emma had made for him with the same genuine appreciation he'd show a crown of gold. Later, after the picnic was packed up and the girls had been dropped off at their respective homes, Alexandra sat in her parked Mercedes outside her penthouse. The setting sun caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. All the trappings of wealth she'd always worn, like armor. She touched the mirror gently, studying her own face as if seeing it anew. "Maybe he's richer than I ever was," she whispered to her reflection, the truth of it settling deep in her heart. The elevator dinged in Alexandra's penthouse as she sat reviewing documents at her desk. The sound of angry footsteps made her freeze. She knew those heavy steps all too well. Her father's presence always filled a room before he entered it. Charles Harrington burst through her office door without knocking, his expensive suit as crisp as his rage. "Have you completely lost your mind?" His voice boomed across the marble floors. Alexandra's hands trembled slightly as she set down her pen. "Father, I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly not." He tossed a society magazine onto her desk. On the cover was a photo of her dancing barefoot at the community hall with Emma and Ethan. "Care to explain this circus act?" "I don't owe you explanations about how I spend time with my niece," Alexandra tried to keep her voice steady, but old fears crept in. Your niece? Charles's laugh was cold and sharp. You mean the child you're allowing to associate with her janitor father? The whole city is talking about how a Harrington heiress is slumming it with the help. Alexandra stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Ethan is Emma's father. He has every right. Rights? Charles cut her off. That man has no rights. He's nothing but a gold digger who got lucky. He paced the room like a caged lion. I've already spoken to our lawyers. We're filing for full custody. The color drained from Alexandra's face. What? You heard me. The child is a Harrington. She deserves better than some maintenance man playing daddy on weekends. And you? He turned to face her, eyes blazing. You're clearly too emotional and irresponsible to be her guardian. You can't do this, Alexandra whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew all too well what her father was capable of. I can, and I will. Charles pulled out his phone, showing her documents. Our legal team has already prepared everything. Your recent behavior proves you're unfit. Dancing in community halls? Letting Emma play in public parks with common children? This ends now. The elevator dinged again. Alexandra's heart sank as she heard Emma's excited voice, followed by Ethan's gentle laugh. They were returning from their afternoon together. Perfect timing, Charles sneered. Emma bounded into the office, then stopped short at the sight of Charles. Grandfather? She backed up until she bumped into Ethan, who had appeared in the doorway. Ethan's expression shifted as he assessed the tension in the room. Mr. Harrington, he said quietly, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. Charles's lip curled. So, this is the janitor who thinks he can join our family. He looked Ethan up and down with disgust. I suppose you think you've hit the jackpot. Emma, sweetheart, Ethan said calmly. Why don't you go to your room for a bit? Emma glanced between the adults, then hurried away. Once she was gone, Ethan stepped fully into the office. I don't want money, Mr. Harrington. I only want to be a father to my daughter. Your daughter? Charles laughed. A man who can barely afford rent has no business raising a Harrington heir. My lawyers will prove you're an unfit parent. We'll make sure everyone knows about your financial struggles, your second jobs, your inability to provide. Alexandra watched Ethan's face, expecting anger or fear. Instead, she saw something that made her chest ache, quiet dignity. You can investigate me all you want, Ethan said. You'll find a man who works honest jobs to support his children, who carries an extra EpiPen because his daughter has asthma, who reads bedtime stories every night, no matter how tired he island. Charles stepped closer, towering over Ethan. I'll destroy you in court. I'll drain every penny you have fighting this battle. By the time I'm done, you won't even be able to afford that janitor's uniform. Alexandra felt sick. She knew her father's threats weren't empty. She'd seen him crush people before, remove obstacles with brutal efficiency. Father, please. But Ethan's voice, though quiet, cut through the room. You can strip me of everything, Mr. Harrington, but not my love for Emma. The words hung in the air, simple and powerful. Alexandra saw something flicker across her father's face, not doubt exactly, but perhaps the first hint that this opponent wouldn't be as easily crushed as others. Charles straightened his suit jacket. We'll see about that. He pulled more papers from his briefcase and slapped them on Alexandra's desk. Expect to hear from our lawyers. And Alexandra, his cold eyes fixed on his daughter. Remember where your loyalties should lie. He strode out, leaving behind a silence heavy with the weight of what was to come. Alexandra stared at the legal documents, her hands shaking. The custody battle that would change everything had begun. The courthouse loomed like a mountain of stone and judgment before Ethan as he climbed the steps, tugging at his tie. The suit he wore had come from a thrift store, the best he could find on short notice. It was a little tight around the shoulders and slightly faded, but clean and pressed with care. Inside the courtroom, polished wood gleamed everywhere. The morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan's footsteps echoed as he made his way to his seat, feeling every eye in the room on him. Alexandra sat rigidly on the other side, wrapped in a tailored navy dress that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Her face was pale, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When their eyes met briefly, he caught something that looked like regret in her expression before she quickly looked away. Charles Harrington's legal team filled an entire table, 4 lawyers in suits that cost more than Ethan's car, their leather briefcases bulging with papers. They carried themselves with the easy confidence of men who rarely lost. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Margaret Wheeler entered, her robes flowing behind her. Everyone stood, and Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. The lead lawyer for Harrington, Mr. Bradley, rose first. His voice was smooth as silk but sharp as a knife. "Your Honor, we're here today because a janitor, a man who can barely support one child, is attempting to claim parental rights over Emma Harrington, heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country." Ethan's hands clenched under the table as Bradley continued. "Mr. Cole has no resources, no proper home environment, and no understanding of the world Emma comes from. How can a man who cleans floors possibly prepare her for the responsibilities of her position?" Pictures appeared on a screen. Ethan's apartment building with its peeling paint, his old car, the cafe where he sometimes picked up extra shifts. Each image meant to show his poverty, his unworthiness. Furthermore, Bradley continued, Mr. Cole has had no contact with Emma for 7 years. He claims ignorance of her existence, but can we really trust that? Perhaps he knew and stayed away, waiting for an opportune moment to claim his supposed rights. Ethan's lawyer, a kind-faced woman named Sarah Chen, who had taken his case pro bono, stood next. "Your Honor, my client has worked honestly his entire life. He maintains 2 jobs to support his daughter Lily, ensures she never goes without necessities, and has shown remarkable character in the face of adversity." She displayed different pictures. Ethan volunteering at Lily's school, helping elderly neighbors with repairs, the small garden he maintained behind his apartment building, where he grew vegetables to share with families in need. When he discovered he had another daughter, Mr. Cole didn't ask for money or make demands. He simply wanted to know her, to love her as he loves Lily, and in the short time they've known each other, he has shown nothing but dedication to building a relationship with Emma. The morning dragged on with testimony after testimony. Charles Harrington's witnesses spoke of the privileges Emma would lose, the opportunities she'd miss, the society she belonged in. Each word felt like another brick in a wall between Ethan and his daughter. During a brief recess, Ethan sat alone on a wooden bench in the hallway, head bowed. He thought of Emma's smile when they read stories together, of how she and Lily had become instant sisters, of the simple joy in their shared ice cream cones and park visits. The courtroom doors opened again, and people began filing back in for the afternoon session. Ethan stood, straightening his borrowed suit jacket, when a small voice pierced the formal quiet. "Daddy!" Emma had broken away from her handler, her patent leather shoes clicking on the marble floor as she ran. Her dark curls bounced, her blue dress fluttered, and her face shone with pure love as she raced toward him. "I love you, Daddy!" she cried out, throwing herself into his arms. Ethan caught her, holding her close as gasps echoed through the chamber. She buried her face in his neck, small arms wrapped tight around him. The entire courtroom seemed to freeze. Charles Harrington's face turned purple with rage. Alexandra's hand flew to her mouth. The lawyers shuffled papers nervously, unsure how to proceed after such an unscripted moment. Emma clung to Ethan, her small voice carrying in the stunned silence. "Please, don't let them take me away from you and Lily. Please, Daddy." Ethan could only hold her, his heart too full for words, while the shocked whispers continued around them. Alexandra sat rigid in her silk-lined chair, her manicured nails digging into her palms as she watched her father's expensive lawyers tear into Ethan's character. The mahogany-paneled courtroom felt suffocating, despite its high ceilings and grand windows. Charles Harrington's smirk made her stomach turn. "Your Honor," the lead attorney drawled, adjusting his gold cufflinks, "Mr. Cole earns barely enough to support his current daughter. How can he possibly provide the lifestyle Miss Emma deserves?" Ethan sat quietly in his department store suit, his dignity intact despite the onslaught. Alexandra noticed how he kept his eyes forward, refusing to be shamed. The memory of that night at the gala rushed back, her cruel words, the terrifying moments when she couldn't breathe, and Ethan's steady hands saving her life. He hadn't hesitated, despite her mockery. The same hands that now held Emma's drawings with such tenderness had pulled her back from the brink. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, Mr. Cole's working hours are erratic. He holds multiple jobs, leaving little time for proper parenting. Alexandra's throat tightened. She remembered watching Ethan at the park, somehow finding energy after a double shift to play soccer with the girls. He never complained, never asked for anything, not even when she'd offered money. I want family, he'd said simply. Her father's satisfied expression from across the courtroom made something snap inside her. The weeks of seeing Emma bloom under Ethan's care, of watching Lily and Emma become inseparable sisters, of witnessing true parenting that had nothing to do with bank accounts. It all crystallized into sudden clarity. Alexandra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Your Honor, I need to speak. The judge peered over his glasses. Miss Harrington, this is highly irregular. Your testimony isn't scheduled until— Please, she said, her voice cracking. This concerns my sister's child. I'm Emma's legal guardian, and I need to be heard. The courtroom fell silent. Charles's smirk vanished, replaced by a dangerous glare. Proceed, the judge said after a moment. Alexandra smoothed her designer dress, a habit born of nervousness. I grew up in the world my father wants for Emma. We had everything money could buy, but none of what truly matters. Her voice gained strength. My sister Rachel ran away from that coldness. She found warmth with Ethan Cole, even if it was brief. And now I understand why. She turned to face the court directly. I once insulted this man for being poor. I looked down on him because his clothes weren't expensive, because he worked honest jobs that I thought beneath me. But then he saved my life without hesitation, showing more nobility than I'd ever known. Charles stood up, his face darkening. Alexandra, sit down immediately. No, Father. She lifted her chin. I've watched Ethan with Emma. I've seen him work extra shifts to buy her favorite cereal. I've watched him read her bedtime stories even when he's exhausted. He's taught her about kindness, about faith, about what real love looks like. Tears threatened, but Alexandra blinked them back. My father can offer Emma private schools and trust funds. But Ethan Cole offers her something priceless, a parent who sees her heart, not her inheritance, who teaches her character instead of status, who shows her that dignity doesn't come from a bank account. The judge leaned forward, interested. Are you saying you support Mr. Cole's custody claim? Absolutely. Alexandra's voice rang clear. Emma deserves the father who drives an old car because he puts her needs first, who wears second-hand clothes so his daughters can have new ones, who showed me that true wealth isn't in my wallet, it's in how we love each other. Charles Harrington stormed toward her, his face purple with rage. You ungrateful little— Mr. Harrington, the judge's gavel cracked sharply. Return to your seat or I'll have you removed. Alexandra kept going, her hands trembling but her voice steady. I was wrong about Ethan Cole. We all were. He's not poor. He's rich, in all the ways that matter. And Emma. She smiled softly at the little girl who sat wide-eyed in the front row. Emma is already becoming someone beautiful under his care. Someone kind and real, not artificial like I was raised to be. Charles sank back into his chair, his fury palpable. You'll regret defying me, he snarled. Alexandra felt her knees weaken, the old fear of her father's power washing over her. But then she felt a warm hand take hers. Ethan had crossed the courtroom silently, his calloused fingers wrapped around hers, strong and supporting. For the first time in her life, Alexandra Harrington held hands with a janitor in front of the entire world. And for the first time, she felt truly strong. The judge's chambers smelled of old wood and leather as everyone filed back in after the recess. Alexandra's heart thundered in her chest, her usually perfect posture crumbling under the weight of anticipation. Beside her, Ethan sat with quiet dignity in his worn suit, his calloused hands clasped tightly in prayer. Charles Harrington lounged in his seat with the confidence of a man who had never lost a battle, His steel-gray eyes flickered between his daughter and the janitor with undisguised contempt. "All rise," the bailiff called out. The rustle of expensive suits and dresses filled the air as everyone stood. Judge Martha Wilson adjusted her glasses, her weathered face serious as she surveyed the courtroom. "Please be seated," she said, her voice firm but kind. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, I am prepared to deliver my ruling in the matter of custody for Emma Harrington." Alexandra reached blindly for Ethan's hand, surprising herself. He squeezed back gently, offering strength she didn't deserve but desperately needed. "This case," Judge Wilson continued, "has revealed complex dynamics of family, wealth, and most importantly, love." She paused, looking directly at Charles Harrington. "Mr. Harrington, while your financial resources are considerable, this court finds your petition for custody to be without merit." Charles's face darkened like storm clouds gathering. His lawyer leaned forward to whisper something, but he waved him off with an angry gesture. "Furthermore," the judge went on, "this court recognizes Mr. Ethan Cole's paternal rights as Emma's biological father. The evidence of his character, despite modest means, shows a man of integrity and genuine devotion to both his daughters." Tears spilled down Alexandra's cheeks. She felt Ethan trembling beside her, though his face remained composed. "Therefore, I rule that primary custody will remain with Miss Alexandra Harrington, who has proven herself a dedicated guardian despite her initial reservations. However, Mr. Cole is granted full recognition and shared parental rights, with a generous visitation schedule to be arranged between the parties." The tension in the courtroom broke like a dam. Emma, who had been sitting quietly with a social worker, broke free and ran toward them. Her patent leather shoes clicked against the floor as she threw herself into their arms. "Now I have all my family," she whispered, her small arms trying to embrace both Ethan and Alexandra at once. Alexandra sobbed openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. She didn't care about her perfect appearance anymore. The weight of years of coldness and pretense seemed to melt away as she held Emma and felt Ethan's steady presence beside them. Charles Harrington stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is preposterous," he spat. "I'll appeal." "Father, stop," Alexandra said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You've controlled enough of our lives. Emma deserves better than what you gave Rachel and me." The mention of Rachel's name made Charles flinch. For a moment, vulnerability cracked his imperial facade, but he quickly masked it with anger. Without another word, he stormed out of the courtroom, his legal team scrambling to follow. Ethan finally lifted his head, and Alexandra saw tears in his eyes too. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. Judge Wilson smiled warmly. "Mr. Cole, Miss Harrington, I see before me the makings of a beautiful family. Not because of wealth or status, but because of love. Don't waste this opportunity." Emma tugged at both their hands. "Can we go home now? All of us?" Alexandra looked at Ethan, really looked at him. The man she had once cruelly dismissed as beneath her now stood as her equal, her partner, in giving Emma the love she deserved. His quiet strength had never wavered, even when facing down the full force of the Harrington fortune. "Yes, sweetheart," Ethan said to Emma, but his eyes met Alexandra's. "We're all going home." Their small group made their way out of the courtroom, Emma skipping between them. Lily waited in the hallway with Mrs. Chen, Ethan's elderly neighbor who had been watching her. The sisters rushed to embrace each other, their joy echoing off the austere courthouse walls. Alexandra watched them, her heart so full it hurt. She remembered the night of the gala, her cruel words to Ethan, how he had saved her life anyway. How could she have been so blind? The true poverty had been in her heart, not in his wallet. Ethan gently touched her elbow. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed to whisper, "I've never been better." The elevator in Ethan's apartment building was out of order again. Alexandra Harrington, still in her designer suit from work, climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor. Her heels clicked against the worn steps, echoing in the stairwell. The sound reminded her of how out of place she was here, but something pulled her forward anyway. The hallway light flickered as she approached Ethan's door. From inside, she heard laughter bright and genuine, so different from the polite chuckles at her usual society gatherings. She smoothed her skirt, took a deep breath, and knocked. The door swung open to reveal Ethan in a simple blue shirt and jeans, a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. "Welcome," he said warmly, stepping aside to let her in. "The girls have been waiting for you." Alexandra stepped into the small apartment, and immediately the aroma of home cooking wrapped around her. The living room was modest but tidy, with worn but clean furniture. Crayon drawings decorated the refrigerator, and a small bookshelf held well-loved children's books. "Aunt Alex," Emma called out, running from the kitchen with Lily close behind. Both girls wore matching aprons covered in flour. "We helped make dinner." "You did?" Alexandra knelt carefully, letting Emma hug her. The little girl's excitement was contagious, and Alexandra found herself smiling genuinely. "What did you make?" "Spaghetti and meatballs," Lily announced proudly. "And garlic bread. It's Daddy's special recipe," Emma added, grabbing Alexandra's hand and pulling her toward the kitchen. "Come see." The kitchen was tiny compared to Alexandra's gourmet one at home, but it buzzed with activity. A pot bubbled on the stove, and the small table was set with mismatched plates and simple glasses. Someone had placed a mason jar with wildflowers in the center. "The girls picked those flowers in the park today," Ethan explained, noticing her gaze on the makeshift centerpiece. "They wanted to make it special for you." Alexandra's throat tightened unexpectedly. In her world, flower arrangements cost hundreds of dollars and were chosen to impress. These simple wildflowers, picked by small, loving hands, somehow meant more. "Everything smells wonderful," she managed to say, watching Ethan check the pasta. "Can I show Aunt Alex my room while we wait?" Emma asked, bouncing on her toes. "Of course," Ethan nodded. "Dinner's in 10 minutes. Emma's room, shared with Lily, was small but cheerful. Bunk beds took up one wall, decorated with twinkling lights and colorful blankets. A desk beneath the window held homework papers and art supplies. Alexandra noticed how the girls had clearly divided the space equally, sharing everything with sisterly compromise. "Look!" Emma pointed to a new photo frame by her bed. It showed all 4 of them at the park last weekend, caught in mid-laugh. "Daddy says it's my family picture." Alexandra touched the frame gently. The woman in that photo looked different from her usual polished self, relaxed, genuine, happy. She hardly recognized herself. "Girls," Ethan called from the kitchen. "Time to wash up for dinner." Back in the kitchen, Ethan was placing the last dishes on the table. The modest meal looked more inviting than any 5-star restaurant Alexandra had visited lately. Everyone took their seats, but before anyone reached for the food, Ethan cleared his throat softly. "In our home," he explained to Alexandra, "we always say grace before meals. Would you join us?" Alexandra couldn't remember the last time she'd prayed. At her father's house, meals had been about business discussions and social positioning, but looking at the earnest faces around the table, she nodded. "Girls, would you like to lead tonight?" Ethan asked. Emma and Lily clasped their hands together, and Alexandra followed suit, feeling oddly vulnerable. "Dear God," the girls recited together. "Thank you for our food and our family. Thank you for bringing us all together. Bless this meal and help us remember those who don't have enough. Amen." "Amen," Ethan echoed softly, and Alexandra whispered it too, surprised by how right it felt. The meal was simple but delicious. Alexandra watched in amazement as Ethan cut Emma's meatballs into smaller pieces while simultaneously listening to Lily's story about school. He managed both girls with patient attention, never making either feel less important. The conversation flowed naturally. There were no political discussions, no business negotiations, no subtle social maneuvering. Instead, they talked about the girls' art projects, a funny thing that happened at the park, and plans for the weekend. Alexandra found herself relaxing, actually tasting her food instead of just mechanically eating it. The spaghetti sauce was clearly homemade, rich with herbs and love. The garlic bread was slightly burnt on one edge, probably where the girls had helped, but it tasted better than any artisanal bakery's creation. "Would you like more?" Ethan offered, noticing her empty plate. "Yes, please," Alexandra surprised herself by saying. She couldn't remember the last time she'd asked for seconds. After dinner, the girls helped clear the table, another surprise for Alexandra, who had grown up with servants handling everything. There was something beautiful about the family working together, each person doing their part. "Hot chocolate time," Lily announced, and Ethan smiled indulgently. "Our after-dinner tradition," he explained to Alexandra. "Would you like some?" Soon they were all settled in the living room with mugs of hot chocolate. The girls had changed into their pajamas, and the evening light filtered softly through the simple curtains. Emma leaned against Alexandra's side, while Lily showed them a book she'd gotten from the library. Alexandra looked around the modest room, taking in the worn carpet, the second-hand furniture, the walls that needed fresh paint. Yet somehow, this space held more warmth than her entire penthouse. The love here was palpable, filling every corner with something money couldn't buy. She thought about her usual evenings, lonely dinners ordered from expensive restaurants, eaten while checking emails, or social events, where every word was calculated. This simple meal with Ethan and the girls had given her something she'd been missing her entire life. Holding her mug close, Alexandra leaned over and whispered softly, "This is richer than any banquet I've ever had." The autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery's maple trees, scattering golden leaves across the peaceful grounds. Alexandra stood before Rachel's headstone, her designer boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. Next to her, Ethan held Emma's small hand while Lily clutched a bouquet of white lilies, Rachel's favorite flowers. Alexandra's fingers trembled as she traced the engraved letters of her sister's name. The polished granite felt cool against her skin, so different from the warmth she remembered in Rachel's hugs. "I brought your favorites, Mommy," Emma said softly, taking a single lily from Lily's bouquet and placing it at the base of the stone. Lily followed suit, carefully arranging her flowers beside her sister's. The two girls stepped back, their shoulders touching as they stood in quiet reflection. Alexandra's throat tightened. All the carefully constructed walls she'd built over the years began to crumble. "I was so angry with you, Rachel," she whispered, her voice catching. "When you chose Ethan over Father's plans for you, I thought you were throwing everything away." Ethan shifted beside her, but remained silent, giving her the space to continue. "I was jealous," Alexandra admitted, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. "You found real love, and I just had Father's approval and empty parties." She wiped at her eyes with trembling fingers. "When you hid your pregnancy, I should have helped you. Instead, I turned my back, pretended I didn't know. I was such a coward." Emma reached for her aunt's hand, squeezing it tight. "It's okay, Aunt Alex. Mommy wouldn't be mad." Alexandra knelt in the grass, not caring about her expensive dress, and pulled Emma close. "I tried to be strong for you, baby girl, but I did it all wrong. I thought being cold and proper was strength." She looked up at Ethan through tear-filled eyes. "I became exactly what I hated about Father." "That's not true," Ethan said quietly. "You protected Emma. You loved her the best way you knew how. But I was cruel to you," Alexandra's voice cracked. "That night at the gala, I wanted to hurt someone because I was hurting, and then you saved my life anyway." Lily moved closer, her small hand finding Alexandra's shoulder. "Daddy says everyone makes mistakes. What matters is if you're sorry and try to do better." A sob escaped Alexandra's throat, raw and unrehearsed. All her life, she'd hidden her tears, seeing them as weakness. But here, in front of Rachel's grave, surrounded by the family she'd nearly pushed away, the tears felt like healing. "I miss her so much," Alexandra whispered. "She was the only one who saw past all my sharp edges. Who knew the scared little girl hiding behind designer clothes and cruel words?" Ethan knelt beside her in the grass, his presence steady and warm. "Rachel had a gift for seeing the best in people. She never gave up on anyone." He paused, his voice gentle. "And neither should we. Forgiveness is always possible, Alexandra. Always." "How can you forgive me so easily?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "After everything I said and did? Because holding on to bitterness only hurts ourselves?" Ethan replied. "Rachel taught me that, and because I see how much you love Emma, how you're trying to change, that counts for something." Emma and Lily exchanged glances, then simultaneously wrapped their arms around Alexandra and Ethan, creating a circle of embrace before Rachel's grave. "We're family now," Emma declared firmly. "All of us," Lily added with a smile. Alexandra looked at the headstone through her tears, imagining Rachel's gentle smile. "I'm so sorry, sister," she whispered. "I promise I'll do better. I'll love them the way you would have wanted." The autumn sunlight broke through the clouds, warming their little group. A sense of peace settled over them. Not the artificial calm Alexandra had once sought through control and perfection, but something real and healing. Emma tugged at their hands, bringing them all together. "Promise, we'll stay together forever?" she asked, her eyes bright with hope. "Promise," Lily echoed, gripping her sister's hand tight. Alexandra felt Ethan's steady grip as their hands joined with the children's. In that moment, she realized that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts or social status. It was here, in this circle of love and forgiveness, that she finally felt rich. "We promise," they said together, their joined hands strong and sure against the autumn sky. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across Emma's backyard birthday party. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, and colorful balloons bobbed against the fence posts. The scene was worlds away from the lavish galas Alexandra once frequented, yet somehow felt infinitely more precious. Emma twirled in her new party dress, her face glowing with joy as she showed off the sparkly butterflies on the fabric to her sister Lily. Both girls had matching ribbons in their hair. Alexandra's touch, though she'd learned to tie them from watching Ethan's patient hands with Lily's locks each morning. Neighbors filled the modest backyard, carrying casserole dishes and homemade treats. Mrs. Peterson from next door had brought her famous apple pie, while Mr. Rodriguez and his wife arrived with still warm enchiladas. The food table groaned under the weight of love disguised as potluck dishes, so different from the catered spreads Alexandra once considered essential. "Time for cake," Ethan called out, emerging from the kitchen with a homemade birthday cake. It wasn't perfectly frosted like the designer ones Alexandra used to order, but Emma's eyes lit up at the sight of the slightly lopsided creation her father had baked himself. Alexandra watched as Ethan carefully carried the cake, his face a picture of concentration. She remembered how he'd stayed up late last night, determined to get the recipe right, refusing her offers to have it professionally made. "Some things mean more when they come from your own hands," he'd said simply. 8 candles flickered in the early evening light as everyone gathered around. Emma's face glowed as they sang "Happy Birthday," her eyes darting between her father, sister, and Alexandra, as if making sure they were all really there. When she blew out the candles, everyone cheered. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Alexandra asked, helping to cut the cake. Emma grinned, chocolate frosting already smudged on her chin. "Can't tell you, Aunt Alex. But I already got most of it anyway." The simple statement caught in Alexandra's throat. She knew exactly what Emma meant: family, love, belonging. Things that couldn't be bought with all the money in her bank accounts. As the evening progressed, Mr. Wilson from down the street brought out his guitar, and a few other neighbors joined in with their instruments. Soon, the backyard filled with soft music, the kind that invited people to sway and smile. Children ran playing tag between the adults, their laughter mixing with the melody. Lily taught Emma the dance steps she'd learned in school, both girls giggling as they attempted to coordinate their movements. Alexandra stood at the edge of the gathering, taking it all in. String lights twinkled overhead like stars brought down to earth, casting a warm glow over the scene. She watched Ethan chatting with neighbors, completely at ease in this community he'd built long before she entered their lives. His quiet strength and genuine warmth had drawn people to him naturally, creating the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars. The band shifted into a slower song, something sweet and gentle. Ethan looked up, catching Alexandra's eye across the yard. He excused himself from his conversation and walked over to her, his smile holding the same warmth it had shown even on that first night when she'd cruelly dismissed him. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Alexandra felt tears prick at her eyes as she took it. His palm was calloused from work, strong and steady, just like him. They began to sway together as the music played, and she remembered their first dance at the community hall, how it had begun to crack her carefully constructed walls. "Look at them," Ethan whispered, nodding toward their daughters. Emma and Lily had joined hands and were spinning in circles, their dresses fanning out around them. The sight made Alexandra's heart swell. She leaned closer to Ethan, her voice soft with emotion. "You know, I once thought I knew everything about wealth. I had houses, cars, designer, everything." She shook her head at her own blindness. "But you are the richest man I've ever known." Ethan's eyes crinkled with understanding. "Real wealth isn't in what you own," he said gently. "It's in who you love, and who loves you back." Emma spotted them dancing and ran over, pulling Lily along. "Dance with us too," she called out, and soon both girls had joined their embrace, turning it into a four-person swaying hug. Alexandra felt the warmth of their small family circle, the music wrapping around them like a blanket. Here, in this backyard with paper lanterns and homemade cake, surrounded by people who asked nothing of her except her true self, she had found something her father's billions could never buy. They danced together, the girls twirling between them, their laughter rising up to meet the stars. The world beyond the string lights faded away. No boardrooms, no society pages, no expectations. There was no need for pride or pretense, no dividing line between rich and poor. There was only this: love, faith, and the beautiful beginning they'd found together. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.